Alrighty, we will start to let everyone in. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Let's see, we are working on sharing the screen here. Can everyone see it? For me, it's not quite showing up yet. Let's see, oh, there it is. All right. Welcome. We'll let everyone have another minute or two to sign on. Today we'll be covering demystifying diverse and inclusive PR campaigns. Try saying that 5 times fast, a bit of a mouthful. But we're super excited to talk about this today. While we give everyone a few more minutes to sign on, we'll actually kick it off with a quick poll that we'll be able to discuss throughout the session. So this is a question I'm sure many of us have seen and thought about before. Would you be more likely to support a company that actively promotes diversity and inclusion? So not a trick question. Yes, no, or other. You can share what you think about that in the comments. Tawanda, Samantha, what do you think we're gonna see here? A no-brainer yes, or some more convoluted answers?
I think it's a no-brainer.
I would agree. I think it's a no-brainer.
I imagine so too, but we'll see what we get. We get some creative feedback with these poll questions. It's really fun to see the different takes and reasoning.
Yeah, I'd be curious anyone who types other what those
Right.
And we can't vote, so we can't weigh in.
Right.
We can weigh in after. All good. We'll see the percentages and what we get here. So for those of you just now signing on, we're doing a quick poll to kick off the session, and then we'll get to it. I'll give everyone another couple seconds to answer that. Okay, we're starting to get the responses roll in. All right, we still have people filing in. Awesome. Also, if you want to share in the chat where you're calling in from, we love to start off that way just to see how wide we're spanning around the world. I'm from Florida today, and our panelists, if you want to share where you're coming from.
Sure. I am from Columbia, Maryland.
Awesome. All right, we got all over the place.
Yes, I am currently in Glen Burnie, Maryland, so not far from Columbia.
Awesome. So we got the East Coast covered here. Oh, India. Wow. Welcome.
Oh, we're international. All right.
Hey, that's fantastic.
Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and publish these poll results and see what we've got. Okay, we've got two others. If you want to share in the chat, let's hear it. Or maybe you're just keeping us on our toes. Okay. Oh, other. Okay. Got some feedback. So promoting DE&I is different than positively engaging in change relating to DE&I. So probably more around operationalizing your efforts. Definitely a good point there.
Very good point.
Cool. All right, let's kick it off. So before we get into all the good stuff, we'll do a few introductions. So we'll move into that. Cool. So I'm Sam. For anyone who's not met me, I'm the marketing manager at Propel. Before joining the team here, I've had a handful of strategic communications positions across different industries with a PR focus, including nonprofit, education reform, and in-house cybersecurity PR. So I'm very excited to have our guests here today. We have Tawanda Johnson. She is the public relations principal for Praiseworthy People PR. Tawanda is an experienced writer, editor, strategic and digital communicator, and PR expert. She received her bachelor's degree in journalism, actually, from Syracuse University, so former journalist in the house, and master's degree in strategic PR from the George Washington University. Tawanda began her professional career as a journalist at Kennett Suburban Newspapers in Westchester County, New York, and that was followed by positions at Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the New Pittsburgh Courier, and the Baltimore Examiner. Her career has involved covering issues such as municipal government, police, STEM education, science policy, entertainment, and diversity issues, bringing us here today. So for the past 15 years, she's worked in the PR field, primarily on projects involving the US Congress. She's also skilled in design thinking concepts, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So mouthful from me. So happy you're here today, Tawanda.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course. And last but not least, Samantha McCoy is the founder and CEO of MissionKey Communications with us today. She's provided communication support for nonprofits and entrepreneurs since 2006. As a PR pro and past radio show producer, she's developed specific insight onto how media professionals can decide what to cover. She uses her expertise to prepare clients for their time in the spotlight. So her agency, MissionKey Communications, works with organizations and entrepreneurs who are creative innovators in business and culture. She has her BA in corporate communications and master's in management. She has presented at the Smithsonian National Affiliations Conference, National Black Public Relations Conference, and the Association of African American Museums Conference. And her signature talk is Vision, Values, and Visibility, How to Build a Personal Brand That Lasts. So thank you so much, Samantha, as well, for joining us.
Thank you.
And to avoid confusion, I'll be Sam, she'll be Samantha for today. But we'll head right into the agenda. So to cover these little laundry list items, so we'll start off with some more information about Propel for those of you who are new to us. We'll get into the state of DE&I and PR today, using our influence as PR practitioners, what the building blocks look like for a diverse and inclusive campaign, and finally some campaign examples, my personal favorite part, wrapping up with a Q&A. And I always like to remind you all, if you have any key takeaways or favorite quotes or parts of what we're talking about while we're on air, you can tweet #PropelLive with those aha moments. So one last to do here to get us going. We'll go into the background of Propel. So a little bit about us. We are proud to be the first PR tool built by PR people. It was co-founded in 2019 by Zach Cutler and David Cohen. Zach ran his own agency for 9 years before starting Propel, and his inspiration was just sparked by his personal pain points. He was always looking for better tech to manage his team, campaigns, and relationships, and not finding the right one, he sold his agency and started Propel. So now we are on a mission to democratize and make PR tech accessible to the masses. We support leading brands and agencies like Real Chemistry, Microsoft, NPR, and more by reimagining earned media. We have lots of first-of-a-kind features, and this month I'll do a little shout out because we launched our first AI-powered tool. Her name is Amiga, and she's drafting press releases and pitches for our users. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. Our communications manager, Aton, will drop that link in the chat for you to play around with on your own time if you would like. Okay, here we go. So let's get into it with the state of DE&I in PR today. So just kicking this off generally, we'll get into the first slide here. I would like to ask our panelists, where are we at, in your opinion, as an industry? So Samantha, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. I definitely believe that the PR industry is making some strides in DE&I, but we definitely do have a long way to go. Just in looking at research, there was a recent study by the Diversity Action Alliance that still shows that as of 2021, only 28% of employees in the PR field are ethnically diverse. And when you look at CEOs and directors, that percentage drops to 7%. And there was also a recent study done by the Institute from Public Relations that there is no agreement among PR professionals about how to even define DE&I. So, we still don't have, a unified definition for those terms. So I definitely believe that we do have some work to do both internally as far as organizations and, embracing diverse candidates, giving them opportunities for promotion and leadership, and also even defining what DE&I is. Of course, there's the belonging piece as well. That wasn't even mentioned anywhere in the study. So we definitely do have a ways to go on that.
Absolutely. And I saw a few articles even the past few weeks with PR Week just explaining that, and how with what you're saying about the drop in senior level employees and leadership representing everyone, how are we to make change if that demographic is just very specific to one group of people or another?
So
Tawanda, here go. Sorry, should I cut
I'm
you off?
chomping at the bit here.
To cut you off and invite you to speak at the same time, please.
I definitely think it's important to diversify our ranks. I feel like we've got to look beyond typical employment sites when we're trying to recruit people, for example. I think we ought to think about looking at HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, MSI, minority serving institutions, as places for recruitment. These places have solid communication programs, but yet somehow they're an untapped resource. And so I think if we're going to do better in the field, we have to begin with recruitment. And again, that's going to start with looking beyond the typical places where we might find potential candidates.
Absolutely. And just starting at the root of that and changing the system from the ground up, I think is really valuable advice. Of course, there's a long way to go, and that is clear. There's much to do. But looking back a little bit, Tawanda, if you want to comment on that a little bit more, at the PR industry maybe 5 years ago or even 1 year ago, how far do you think we've come, if at all? And what do you see the differences are today versus just a few years back?
I mean, I think like Samantha said, I think the statistics are pretty much the same. I know I also did a little bit of research and found out that pretty much the PR industry is primarily comprised of white individuals, more than I think 87%. And so I think we just have a long way to go. I don't think that we've made enough progress. And again, I think it's because we haven't been looking in the right places in order to diversify our ranks. So I think that, again, a year ago now, I don't think it's really made that much of a difference, honestly. I mean, I think we still have a long way to go in this field.
Samantha, would you agree about not seeing much change, or what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely would agree. And I would say probably in the last year or two, probably I guess maybe 1 to 5 years, I have seen a lot more, specifically Black women launching their own agencies. And I'm assuming, I know one of the reasons that I launched mine is because, I didn't find those opportunities through other institutions and agencies. So if there was a shift, I would say there's a shift in more business owners starting their own agencies because they didn't see those senior level opportunities available to them.
Wow. Yeah. And that's an unfortunate reality to push anyone to. Of course, that's not good, but I'm hopeful that seeing changes like that and more women of color in power, like you're saying, that could actually start to shift systemically towards seeing more Black women leading their own agencies, as your colleagues are. Are you hopeful that in the next maybe 5 to 10 years we should expect to see more change, or are you seeing more of a stagnant direction?
Yeah, you know what, Sam? I really think that this where we are now is a really critical point for. I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
I apologize. I thought my phone was off. Yes, I definitely would say that we're at a really critical point right now in PR where we can really drive where we're going to go in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that the way that we respond right now, now that the momentum has died down for a lot of companies and organizations as it relates to DEI, in the aftermath of, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, et cetera, that momentum has died down significantly. And I think that we as PR practitioners and advisors to our clients and creators of campaigns, we have a strong influence in major companies across the US and really across the world. So I think it's up to us to say, where do we want to go in the next 5 to 10 years? And we really have to be the leaders, because I believe that what we do will make a huge impact. And I think at this point, we can really go one way or the other. So I'm hopeful that we move forward and not backward.
Absolutely. So Wanda, I'll invite you to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that. I think companies are demanding also more diversity within PR campaigns. They realize that in order to be considered authentic, that they have to actually truly show that they value diversity. So you can't just put on your website that you support DE&I. You have to truly show that. And the way that you do that, in my opinion, is that you have people in leadership who actually value DE&I. And also, if you have a diversity working group within your organization, that group is not just run by people of color. You have to have buy-in from the top. So I think that that's important. And I think more and more organizations and companies realize that they just can't pay lip service to DE&I anymore, because people are seeing right through it.
Absolutely. And that is something we're exactly going to cover in a few minutes here in the presentation. So I'll actually move us to our next slide, which is focusing on how you use your influence as a PR practitioner, just because we have this unique advantage as professional communicators to support different movements, causes, elevate different groups of people. So I am excited to hear how each of you use your expertise to do this and what that looks like. So Samantha, I'll ask you to begin with, what are some of your favorite ways that you're able to make a difference in the DEI space for the PR industry, especially with your agency and the types of clients you work with?
Yeah, so I think that our agency is really unique because we specialize in working with clients from diverse communities. So most of the clients that we have worked with so far are from diverse backgrounds in some way. A lot of them are from the African American community. And so one of the ways that we really pride our agency is that we give opportunities for African American small business owners and thought leaders, authors, experts, people who may not have the budget to hire a larger agency. We allow them the opportunity to amplify their stories. And so we're able to give them both local and national exposure. And so that is one of the ways that we contribute to DEI, is just sharing those stories, because if they weren't working with us, who knows if those stories would be getting shared or not.
Absolutely. And that is hugely valuable just as far as resources are concerned, opening up that playing field for all kinds of voices and messages and missions. To Wanda as well, I'm curious to hear more about your background too, because meeting before this, she let me know that her specialization and a lot of her training was in advocacy PR, actually, to affect policy change. So if you want to share with our audience more about what that training looked like and or the hands-on experience that has allowed you to do that so well.
Sure. So for me, advocacy is really near and dear to my heart. It's something that I've always believed in. My mother marched with Dr. Martin Luther King during the 1960s to get the 1965 Voting Rights Act passed. And so I come from a long line of advocates. And so when I decided to go into journalism, I really wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be able to affect change. I wanted to be able to tell the stories of marginalized groups, especially whose stories we rarely hear about, or if we do hear about them, they're always negative. And so my goal now with Praiseworthy People PR is to tell the positive stories that are out there, especially as it relates to people of color. Regarding advocacy, though, getting back to that, that is something that is, again, something that I have longed to do for a long time. And in terms of how you get into it, well, one tried and true tactic is the op-ed. And so it's important that if you are interested in media advocacy, that you master that, because oftentimes when you're trying to affect change, even on a local level or a national level, you need to be able to make sure that the person that you're targeting, so in many cases, it might be a member of Congress, it might be a local congressperson, that person sees your message. And oftentimes they are looking in their local newspapers to see what their constituents think. And so when it comes to advocacy, I would say that's a key tactic to try and master.
Absolutely. Definitely popular in that. I worked in education reform PR at one point, and the op-ed was definitely the go-to with affecting policy change. And just the way that everything's written is so important. Like you're saying, getting that messaging down and getting that across to the appropriate audience.
Right. It allows you to be able to own your message. So if oftentimes in PR, we may reach out to a reporter with hopes that that reporter will actually cover a particular story event in the way that we want it covered. But again, reporters, they can have a different take on a particular issue. And so you may actually be disappointed in a particular story. But with an op-ed, it definitely allows you to own that message.
Absolutely. And a little bit more about your background in advocacy PR. So you had official training for that in school, to my understanding, but we were talking as well a little bit about the APR and that certification and what it really educates you on or not when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Tawanda was letting me know that sometimes the questions, even though they might cover those things, are maybe a little general, or there's not so much training on things like this. So do you want to share a little bit more about that and what you read?
So the Public Relations Society of America, which provides the accreditation for PR professionals, it's called the APR. They offer an exam. It's a 3-hour exam that you have to take. I'm in the process of studying for it now, so this is why I know this, but there isn't a huge emphasis on diversity in terms of the questions that are on the exam. And so my whole point is that if, as an industry, we are going to stress that we value diversity, then questions about diversity ought to be on the exam, because we are saying when you get your APR, that you are at the pinnacle of your career, you are at the top of the industry, so to speak, because you have mastered this exam, you have presented case studies before a board. And so again, my point about that is that it's important, it's crucial that we include questions like diversity on this exam. And currently I'm not seeing them, and I'm in the background actually pushing for it. So I'm hopeful that in the near future, so if any of you are thinking about getting your APR, I'm hopeful that that exam will change and that we will truly show that we value diversity within PRSA.
Absolutely. And props to you for taking action on that. My follow-up curiosity would be, what do people do in the meantime? Of course, we hope this changes going forward, but for now, what? But if that's one important step, is just actually going out of your way to move in the right direction, especially with these training programs.
Yeah, I mean, it's talking to people who are running the boot camps to prepare us for the exam. It's talking to mentors who are helping me prepare for the exam, letting them know how I feel about it. And again, I know that it may not happen this year or even next year, but it's something that's really important. And so I plan to, again, that's the advocate in me, continue to push, and hopefully we'll see a positive change.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing about that more. So it's awesome getting more of an inside perspective on what each of your specific PR backgrounds mean to you and how you can use it. But let's get a little bit more into how to go about that. So how you set up your campaigns and how you set up an agency to have what it needs to build successful, diverse and inclusive campaigns. So our first slide here, it actually relates very closely to what we've talked about a few minutes ago, which is what are our clients demanding if you're in an agency, and what are your senior leadership people demanding from you now, which is turning out to be a lot more than it used to. So this was just an article I saw recently in PR Week about it, which is that agencies and even in-house teams need to be able to explain exactly how they're supporting diversity and inclusion in the industry, and that's going to matter who people want to do business with or not. So any advice, Samantha, for how you communicate your methodology and philosophy around these topics as an agency owner?
Yes, like I said, so our agency does tend to work with clients of diverse backgrounds. So we haven't officially been in a position yet where we had to advise clients on, the justification for DEI. But if we were to do so, I definitely would just go with the data. Like, there is so much data that points to the value of inclusive public relations campaigns. And so I don't think that anyone who, is looking at the research and data can refute that. And so to anyone who might be skeptical or not sure, what is the value? Why does this make sense? Why do we need to focus on this? And people don't really want to admit, but the world is changing, and they use the word minority, but that's really not an accurate term. So the world is a lot more diverse in a variety of ways than it was, in the past. And so if you are not thoughtfully engaging these audiences, you're really missing a significant segment of your market, and really losing a competitive advantage as well.
Absolutely. And just early on in campaign building, do you have methodology that your team turns to depending on what client you're working for or what specific goals you're aiming to make sure that your campaigns are authentic and not using the wrong words? Or does that more come from hands-on experience and industry conversations?
Yeah, definitely hands-on experience. We definitely work with our clients to, make sure that we're describing them in the way that they want to be described and referred to. And we also really diversify our campaigns from a media list building standpoint. So we make sure that we are identifying local outlets, national outlets, and then any diverse outlets that are specific and applicable to them. And again, that's one of the benefits of our agency, is that we have relationships across a broad range of media outlets. And to be honest, some media outlets that are not necessarily in the databases. They're just organizations and outlets that we've built through our own hands-on experience and relationships. So we definitely make sure that we incorporate a variety of media outlets within our campaigns.
Absolutely. Actually, Tawanda was sharing a little bit more about that from her time as a journalist, and how much she does appreciate those sorts of connections and people just asking those questions. If you want to share more about that, Tawanda, sometimes it really does go a long way to just build that personal connection outside of your day-to-day database scanning and
Sure. Yeah, when I was a reporter, oftentimes I would meet up with PR professionals for lunch, for dinner. I know now that we're more, we're used to Zooming and all of those things, but you can still build that personal connection. You can hop on a Zoom, try and hop on a Zoom with a reporter, or give a reporter a call, for example. I know that, we're into texting, and we're into, doing everything on our phones, but I think a phone call still goes a long way, actually, to make that personal connection with someone. And again, it's really important that you do make that personal connection, because then you can better understand what that reporter covers. So another thing that I will offer up is that oftentimes I would get reporter or PR people pitching me things that I did not cover, which I found offensive, because I thought, it's pretty simple for you to just read what I cover or either reach out and have a conversation with me about what it is I actually cover. And so oftentimes I would end up deleting press releases because people just did not do basic work, basic homework and find out what I was covering, what I was interested in. So again, that personal touch will go a long way in helping you to avoid those rookie mistakes.
For sure. And just, I think any former journalist, I saw a few supporting comments about that, but just the first sentence could make you click delete. The subject line, you could just trash it, depending on if people are really paying attention, and even taking the time to ask you, what are you working on? And what do you have in store? And doing that research, consuming what you write and whatnot. So all of those basic best practices need to stay top of mind. Looking at the research process a little more, Samantha specializes, as I mentioned, in preparing her clients for even media interviews and public speaking, in addition to just writing those authentic stories and pitching authentic news around diversity and inclusion. So what are some of the steps to that process and making sure your clients are well prepped for a campaign?
Yes, well, I have well, it's funny now, it wasn't funny then, but a story about why I am so passionate about media interview preparation. Several years ago now, when I first got my start in public relations, an executive that I was working with said, "Hey, Samantha, I can't make this interview. Feel free to just take it." And it was a live television interview, one of those ones that was super early in the morning. It was right after a holiday, and I had notes prepared, but I did not give myself enough prep time. So when the day of that interview came and that camera was in my face, I completely froze. And fortunately, it was before the days of social media, so there is no public footage to my knowledge. And I have never watched it. I never requested a recording of it, but I know that I looked like a deer in headlights. So so ever since that experience, I have made it a priority for all of our clients, even if they've had media experience before, to make sure that they are trained and prepared for the interviews. And so what we do is we make sure that we run through questions with them. So we'll give some sample questions, and then we will have them develop key messages, because especially now in the digital age, it's so important that you maximize your opportunities so that you can repurpose the sound bites for other platforms, and really that you get your message across, especially if it's an interview that might be a little bit shorter. You want to make sure that you have those key messages, make sure you really get those out there. And so we will run through interview questions with our clients in advance. And there have been some instances where we have invited professional journalists as well to come in and do media trainings and make sure that the clients are fully prepared and comfortable. Because as we all know, sometimes you don't know where a media interview is going to go. So we like to think of the worst case scenario, like what if they ask this question that you weren't expecting? How would you prepare for that? And that really just helps them to be more confident when they are on media interviews on television, and it also helps prepare for digital and print opportunities as well.
That's amazing. I love that personal experience driving your passion here, and that experience that you had. But those are amazing connections to have. If you have journalists that are willing to help you out with media training, I don't see how it could even get much better than that. I'm sure your clients really appreciate it too, so they're not stuck in that position when they head in for the interview. But this actually, our next slide ties right into that point you made about the messaging informing everything. So making sure that your core points and your core messages that you're working with are what they need to be is definitely a starting point along with research. So any more tips, Tawanda, if you want to loop us back in here, on how to really make sure that your core message is authentic, rather than even just trying to accomplish a certain goal that your client asks for example?
I think, everyone has a story to tell, and I think you just have to be true to whatever your story is. And, it's my job as a PR professional to help you to convey that story in in a great way. But I think you just have to be true to whatever your actual story is. I mean, we all have them. And I think, while data is important to include in campaigns, certainly personal anecdotes go a long way in actually persuading people when it comes to PR campaigns.
Especially heavily working with op-eds, the quote could just be everything that leads to real change and gathering the influence and attention of your audience.
Right. I definitely underscore that when you're crafting an op-ed, to definitely tell that personal story. Again, it's, data is great, and it definitely will move your piece along, and certainly offers credibility to what your personal story is. But there's nothing like an impactful story in terms of reaching people.
Definitely. Samantha, any additional tips on your end for getting the messaging down and making sure it's both powerful and authentic?
Yeah, I just really echo what Tawanda said, just making sure that there is that personal story piece in there. And I like to ask clients, what do you enjoy? What do you like to talk about? What, makes you excited, so that we can incorporate that into your messaging, like really getting into the why of your company, of your philosophy, those things that make you energized. Because when you're incorporating those things into your messaging, you always make the strongest. You feel the most confident when you're making those points.
For sure. And following that, once we've got the messaging, once we've got the research down, a lot of challenges come in the media list, and that's reflected in coverage goals, that's reflected in seeing results only in that handful of just well-known outlets. So I'd like to get a little bit into that, just how you can make a difference at the media list level and make sure that you're not neglecting certain outlets just because they're not top of mind, or commonly, I think, without meaning to cause harm or even know what you're doing, it's easy to think, for a lot of people, just why is my story relevant to some of these more diverse outlets? Like, what are they? How do they relate to my message right now, or my product update or company announcement? So, Tawanda, what do you think about that, and what it takes to make that change at the media list level?
I think first people have to understand that diverse media outlets care about the same issues that majority media outlets do. So the economy, education, crime, these are all issues that impact people of color, just like they impact other people. And so you should not approach this task with the idea that, oh, this is a quote, Black issue or a diverse issue, when in fact, it's an issue that all people care about. And these outlets are hungry for news. They're hungry for news. And one of the ways I've done to build my diverse media list is I've turned to the Black PR Newswire. I've also turned to the National Newspapers Publishers Association, which is a group of Black-owned newspapers, one of which I used to work for. The New Pittsburgh Courier is one of the oldest Black-owned newspapers in the country. But again, these papers and media outlets are covering the same issues that the New York Times is covering, the same issues that the Washington Post is covering, the same issues that the Wall Street Journal is covering. And so what we're doing is we're missing out on real opportunities to make an impact in getting our message in front of these diverse audiences. But you just need to do a little bit of homework. I mean, we can all Google. And if you just Google the Black-owned newspapers, you'll get the group that I just mentioned, the NNPA. If you Google Black PR Newswire, you'll see there's an opportunity for you to send your press release via the Black PR Newswire. So these are basic things that we ought to know as communication professionals, but I just wanted to bring them to your attention.
That's huge. That might be my favorite point today, is just, are you even consuming these outlets' content? Like, maybe this isn't even true that your message is not relevant. It could be extremely relevant. So consuming these journalists' news and seeing if it's even that different. Like you're saying, we're all people, we're all focused on the same societal issues at large and finding out new updates. So that's hugely important. Samantha, anything you'd want to add about the missed opportunities aspect here and what your process looks like? I know you do a lot of manual research and relationship building, which can go a long way as well.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to add is that, in addition to, having the relationships that are your go-tos, don't be afraid to do some of that manual and organic research because you never know what you'll be able to find by doing that. So a lot of relationships that we've built are organic. That's where the majority of our relationships come from. And so I definitely would encourage you to, stretch yourself and, ask yourself, what new media relationships have I built this month or this quarter, in addition to the ones that are my go-tos?
Definitely. And just asking when you have those especially strong connections, like not being afraid to ask, look, I have this update. I want to share it with you. Like how could it be relevant? Is it relevant? What are you working on? How could we work together? Is just underutilized sometimes.
Definitely. Yeah, I think sometimes there's an assumption that your story does not make sense for a diverse media platform. But if you don't have that conversation to even start the relationship, you won't know. There may be some new synergy or, a new idea that can be birthed just through that conversation and that relationship that, you may not have thought about before.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you so much. I'll move us along so we respect everyone's time. This is my favorite part of our webinars when we have some examples. So we'll get into a few specific campaigns now by both of our guests and what it took to get there, really just operationalize everything we've been talking about and how they were able to score really impressive results for some of their clients using everything we're talking about. So Samantha, you can kick us off if you'd like.
Sure. So, one of my examples that we showed is my agency worked with a 15-year-old entrepreneur who had a clothing brand. Well, he still has it, a clothing brand, and he was looking to expand into a new city. And so he had a store in Philadelphia and wanted to expand into the DC area. And so our agency came in and did a press campaign to get him coverage. So we were able to get national coverage and also local coverage as well. And as a result of our work with him, his DC location was supposed to be a pop-up that just lasted for a few months, but because of the amazing coverage that we were able to secure, it is now a permanent location. And so that was an amazing opportunity. And I really wanted to use this example because it showed the diversity of media outlets that we were able to secure for him. So those national outlets and then also African American focused outlets and local outlets as well. And then, oh, sorry.
I was going to say that's incredible. That's so exciting to see PR have that influence and your methodology carry someone like that. It's really cool.
Excellent. And that was another example of, telling stories of, business owners that are doing amazing, amazing things. So the second example that I have is we were actually subcontracted with a creative agency that was working with Timberland, and they had a Black History campaign. So this was more of a project, so it was a really short amount of time. But basically, that agency was looking for someone who had relationships with some African American focused outlets because they have been getting placements in other areas, but they did not have those relationships with any African American focused publications. And so we came in and we were able to get placements in Black Enterprise and The Root, and we had to do it very quickly. But I was really glad that we were able to do that. And that was just an example that, there are some organizations who may not have those relationships with diverse media outlets that they can pitch quickly. And so that is one of the strengths of our agency. So I wanted to include that example as well.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Tawanda, I'll give you the floor on this next slide here to get your perspective and
Sure.
campaign results. Yes.
Thanks, Sam. So in this case study, this is, again, a media advocacy PR campaign that I worked on with a group called Interconnected Justice, which is a group that is seeking to ensure that African-American voices are included in President Biden's recent U.S. Africa Leaders Summit, which actually occurred back in December. And so we talked about, how can we impact change here? Well, we wanted to focus again on a member of Congress. And so we targeted U.S. Representative Gregory Meeks, who's a ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And we worked on an op-ed. And so the first op-ed actually was placed in blavity.com, which is an online news site for Black millennials that is heavily trafficked. So that's a good site for you to check out. And so we pitched the op-ed to Blavity. They picked it up. And then we worked with a reporter from the Griot, and he actually wrote a pretty lengthy story about it. So we were able to send copies of both the op-ed and the story to Congressman Meeks. He loved it. He said, of course, we want to make sure that Black Americans' voices are being included in this new strategy that we have toward Africa. And so he worked with my client to ensure that Black people were able to get their voices heard in the execution of this strategy. So again, with the op-ed, the client was able to also tell a really personal story about his work in Africa, about how it was important that we give the same type of support to Africa that we're giving to Ukraine. So he mentioned that. And so it went over really well, and the client was very pleased with the placement and the outcome. And so we're still doing more work with this client, but this was the beginning of the campaign, and so we were really excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And this is such a unique campaign example, and hopefully we're getting lots of ideas for new outlets to connect with, and ways that you can network with different people to accomplish things like this. So thank you so much. And while we are really burning through time, I feel like we could talk about this really forever. We will move on to one of our final topics here, which may be the most important, resources, tips, and tricks. So Samantha, if you want to start us off, do you have any favorite resources or places that you recommend people check out to really hone in on their knowledge around DEI and how they can improve as PR practitioners?
Yeah, I would just say, start to, like Tawanda said, reading more diverse outlets. And because a lot of times you can see what they're talking about, who the writers are, and following them if you haven't already. And I use a lot of social media to build relationships with these outlets. So, a lot of their budgets may be a little bit smaller. And so, some of their staff may change a little more frequently. But, social media is a great way to stay on the pulse of, who is writing about what. There is also an organization that I follow, ColorCom, Women of Color in Communications, that provides a lot of resources, webinars as well. And so that is another organization to check out if you're not familiar with them.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. Tawanda, what are your favorite resources for staying up to date, or if they align with Samantha's? Same with that.
They pretty much do align with Samantha's, but I just want to add too that wherever you work too, I would say, again, channel that inner advocate and maybe advocate for a DEI working group at your place of employment. Advocate for true training, advocate for buy-in from the top, so that when you do go to your supervisor and say, hey, this is important, we want to do this, we want to make sure the DEI is reflected in this particular campaign, that it's not a battle, that they've already bought into it, that they understand the importance of it. Because again, anybody can post on their website that we support DE&I, but do you really? And so I think that that is important to do. So again, I would just say, try to channel that inner advocate and really make a difference where you work, because I think it'll make your job a lot easier if you're able to do that.
Thank you so much. Such a good point. That's really how we will see changes. Like we talked about in the very beginning, it really needs to happen with action now and moving that forward. So one last thing before we get into questions, if you have any you've been thinking about, remember to drop that in the Q&A or even the chat. We'll take a look at that in a second here. But we'll take a look at PR tips for the road. So this is just a quick little segment we recently added where I'll invite our panelists just to offer 1 to 3 or however many tips for the road based on today's discussion, just your lasting advice for our audience today.
Sure, I can start off. Tips for the road, I would say research and build relationships. And those would be my two. And of course, I definitely also have to mention the National Association of Black Journalists. Definitely can't leave that out. Some of them might be on here, so I didn't leave you out.
That's right. Thank you. Swanda, what are you thinking?
Yes, I love NABJ. I was a former member of NABJ. Shout out NABJ. Definitely, I would have to say find several diverse media outlets that you've never ever known about before. Start reading them. Maybe even take out a subscription to their outlet, and then also figure out who's covering what, and then reach out to that reporter. Establish a relationship with that reporter.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And last but certainly not least, time for questions. So now's your chance to ask our amazing guests for just a few more minutes of their time and expertise. We have one question to start with. Let's see what we got. All right. So how do you recommend approaching a CEO that, quote, doesn't want to deal with DE&I because they consider it a political powder keg?
I can take that. There's a lot of research out there that makes the business case for DE&I. When you invest in DE&I, your employees become more productive. You are better able to increase your bottom line. And I think Bloomberg did a study on it, or there was a story that Bloomberg ran about the business case for DE&I. So I would say do your research and find out what the business case is for it, because again, not everyone is going to have, want to do it for moral reasons. But if you can make a business case for it, I think that will go a long way.
That's a great. Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
That's a great point, and it kind of ties back to what we discussed earlier about missed opportunities. If you can frame a situation where it'll be clear how it will change the bottom line for a business and actually help goals overall, we as PR people know that what causes are valuable, like you mentioned, for moral reasons, but sometimes that's harder to put into words and communicate to leadership.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just really excited because I am currently reading the book Lead to Win by Carla Harris. And she is an executive at Morgan Stanley, I believe. And she has some amazing examples and case studies about the case for DEI in her book. So if you're looking for a resource, that's an excellent one.
Yes, that's great. And then let's see, one more here. As a non-US PR pro, I was wondering what the different cultural considerations are when pitching different outlets in the US. So there are different considerations that this person takes into account when pitching different publications, different countries. So they're curious how those cultural considerations are reflected within the US.
So are they meaning, I don't know if they're meaning like how to make sure that you're aware of different cultural considerations in your messaging. I don't know if that's where you're going with the question, but I would definitely would say, maybe when you're pitching a different culture, looking at what's going on in that culture at the time, just to see if there are anything that you need to be paying attention to or being aware of, that might be going on just from a current event standpoint. I definitely think that that is very important, just to have that extra level of sensitivity. And since you're not part of that culture, it might not be things that you just are automatically aware of just through the news that you listen to. So it might just require a little more research to find out what's going on in that area first, before pitching, so that you can make sure that you're just aware of that before you pitch.
Yes. And Tawanda, anything you want to add on that as well?
No, I think Samantha did a good job answering that. I would concur with that.
Yeah. And yeah, that is just so important, because I almost like to think you should lead in your head, like what could possibly go wrong. I don't remember if Tawanda or Samantha said that earlier, but think about every disaster that could come from even just, how are you? And maybe something happened recently for that group that it's not a good day, or hope you have a good day. Maybe you're softer. Just really the nuances can even be so important. All right. Anything else? We can actually wrap it up if we have no more questions. Samantha, Tawanda, if you want to add in any more lasting wisdom, we're happy to hear it. It looks like we can wrap it up shortly, though.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you so much, Sam, for this opportunity. Thank you for everyone who joined. Oh, I think we might have another question that just came in.
Yes, awesome. So if you want to establish a long-lasting relationship with the media, what's the best approach or your favorite approach?
Yeah, I would say, in my experience, reading what they're writing and sharing it and commenting, because that way they know that you're genuinely interested in their work and you're not only reaching out when you want to pitch.
I would agree with that. And then I would also say follow up with a call and just see if you can, meet up at some point. I know that we're in a super busy time. And like I said earlier, everyone's on Zoom, but you'll be surprised how a phone call could really make a huge impact in establishing that relationship.
And just making sure you're sharing authentically. I always like to remind people of that. Don't just retweet or I loved your article about this and then you didn't even read it. Like, make sure you're sharing and engaging authentically too, so that you start your relationships on a good foot with these journalists too. And I mean, they hear that all the time. Just loved this. Here's what I want. So make sure you're not coming from that angle either.
Yeah, if I could just chime in on that too. Yeah, I would agree. It's just like when you write a thank you note, you don't just say thank you. You say thank you, for this beautiful gift that, I love. It was so thoughtful. So I think similarly, when you reach out to a journalist or if you're commenting on their stories, make sure that you put some details in there about what you actually liked about the story, what you thought was interesting about the story, not just you just loved it.
And last question for the day. Should every PR firm have a DEI statement on their website? I know we talked about how it's more important to actively engage than just have a statement, but do you think the statement's important? I suppose.
I feel like if you're not really actively engaged, don't put the statement out there. That's my personal opinion. I feel like, people are going to see past these statements on websites and they're going to start doing research and they're going to find out that, maybe your organization really doesn't value DEI. So I feel like if your organization is really not doing the work that it takes to truly show that it values DEI, then I wouldn't put the statement out there. Put it out there after you've done the work.
I love that. Awesome. Well, I couldn't thank you more, both of you, for being here and for this amazing conversation. I learned so much. I hope everyone else did too. If you have any questions for me or our panelists, feel free to reach out. They're both on LinkedIn. And if you want to share any other ways to contact you, then you're welcome to share that in the chat here. My email is samantha@propelmypr.com. You can check out our website as well. But yeah, thanks so much, everyone. It was awesome being here.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.